Hi, today I'm going to show you how to cross-hatch. Cross-hatching is another mark-making technique in which we layer lines to create value. Hopefully you've already watched my intro to mark-making with hatching video, so you know the basics of how graphite pencils work and how we go through a series of layers with the different pencils to create value. When we cross-hatch, instead of having all of our lines moving parallel in one direction, our lines are going to be layering, counteracting each other. So we'll have them going in multiple directions to create value. It's my personal favorite way to draw value. I really enjoy cross-hatching. It's also the technique that my students tend to struggle with the most at first. So if it doesn't go well at first, try again. You will get better. Remember that art is a skill and we build talent. We're not born with it. The only way we get better is by trying. So listen, give it a shot, do your best, and if it doesn't turn out right the first time, give it another shot. It'll get better. Cross-hatching is a little bit more complicated than hatching, but at the root, it's the same. We're going to be drawing a series of parallel lines, and we're going to layer them to make value. The difference with cross-hatching is we change the directions of those lines. So we have lines coming in from all four directions. So the first mark that I make goes diagonally from left to right. So what I want you to do is write a 1 in your sketchbook and an arrow that goes left to right. And then you're going to fill in 4 squares, just like this, with a diagonal hatch left to right. The next pass in cross-hatching, instead of layering more of this same diagonal line, we're going to come through in the next pass with diagonal line in the opposing direction. Now, what you have to do when you're cross-hatching or hatching in different angles is you got to be willing to move your sketchbook, because if I hold my hand like this to draw that diagonal, it's uncomfortable. So I'm going to turn my sketchbook a little bit, and I'm going to add diagonals in the opposing directions in each of the box. Your next pass is a horizontal line and then a vertical line. And if you look, you can see that that's created its own little value scale just by layering those lines in 4 different directions: diagonal, diagonal, horizontal, vertical. The trickiest part of this is blending those as we move across the value scale. So I'm going to draw a sample value scale here, and I'm just using my HB, kind of a medium pencil, and I'm going to start with diagonal lines, and I'm going to move, and as I get closer to the end, I'm going to lighten them up and space them out. Then I'm going to do the next pass. I'm going to turn the page, and I'm going to draw my next diagonal. When I draw this set of diagonals, I'm not going to go quite as far out as I did on my first. Okay, so you can see the first set of diagonals I ended here, second set I ended here. Then I'm going to do my horizontal, and again, I'm not going to go quite as far out. So first set of diagonals here, second set here, and my horizontals I ended here. And then I'm going to do my verticals. And again, I'm not going to go quite as far out. Okay, so that's how I start my value scale. And each successive layer I kind of suck back in towards my end here. The mistake students make most often with cross-hatching is they think they need to take each of the 4 steps all the way to the end of each value. And you don't. Your lightest values in cross-hatching will likely just be a hatch. Your next set of values, you might have both diagonals, and then you move back. Now, to finish this value scale, I need to keep coming through with passes in the same manner. Okay, so diagonal, diagonal, horizontal, vertical. So you can see how multiple passes over time builds up that value. Near the end of my value scale, I don't have nearly as many lines layered up, and the lines themselves are lighter. In the darker end of my value scale, I've layered lots and lots of diagonals, horizontals, verticals, and other diagonal. To get dark enough on this end, I'd have to keep moving up my value scale colors, or not colors, hardnesses. What I would like you to do at this point is I just want you to practice in your sketchbook on this page and kind of get used to this process of the diagonal, the horizontal, and the vertical. Try to move from dark to light and build some little mini value scales. The other thing you're going to want to practice is maintaining the same diagonals, verticals, and horizontals every time you layer. If my first layer of diagonals goes like this, and my second layer of diagonals go like this, and my third layer of diagonals in that direction goes like this, it's going to start to look messy and not very purposeful. And we want to learn to crosshatch correctly. And then when we figure out how to do that right and we want a messier crosshatch, then you can build it in, but you build it in on purpose instead of because you don't know how to do the neater version. Once you've built up the ability to kind of make these marks, you've learned how to turn your page and do these kinds of things, how to fade from one mark to another, layer in the same direction. When you feel a little bit more comfortable and confident, our next step is we're going to practice doing this on a sphere, and we're going to practice doing this with all of our graphite pencils. Here is my sphere. I made it by just tracing the inside of a masking tape roll. You can trace anything that's circular to make a sphere. I added horizon line so it looks like it's sitting on a surface, and I just drew in a little light bulb. You could draw a sun, whatever you'd like. It's just to remind me where my light source is. And I'm going to start with my HB pencil, and I'm going to start just like I did with my hatch. I'm going to work on making a crescent moon. I'm going to slow myself down a little bit compared to my practice because I want this to look nice. I'm going to start my mark on the edge of my circle, my sphere. And I'm going to build my diagonals and build my form shadow. Then I build my diagonals in the other way. I turn my page, and I want these diagonals to come through the first set of diagonals at about a 90. Okay, now I'm going to bring in my horizontal. And you want nice long marks with a crosshatch or a hatch. You don't want short little stubbly guys. And as you continue to draw in your marks and overlap, what you should be doing is with every successive mark, you're getting further into that form shadow. And crosshatching really does need somebody to layer up quite a lot to make it look really nice in the end. Right now it kind of looks like plaid, right? Like this is not the look I want to have for my end product. So I need to keep layering. And if you're one of my students, you know I say all the time, drawing is a layering process. You want to build that drawing up. So we're building in this value. Now I'm going to do vertical. That was my HB pencil. Now I'm going to switch to my 2B. And I'm going to go through the same process. With my 2B, I want to make sure that I don't go too far out into my highlight. When I'm making my marks, just like when I was hatching, I want to vary where they start and stop, so they don't all stop at the same point, so I don't get a hard edge shadow. And I want to try to match my diagonal on this pass with the first set of diagonals that I did. So take a moment to kind of find that same diagonal, build it in, and then you're going to build down into that form shadow. And then you'll switch, you'll do the other diagonal, building deeper into the form shadow, the horizontal, and the vertical. That was my 2B. Now I'm going to switch to my 4B, and I'm going to start to focus on my core shadow. So I'm going to avoid my lighter areas. I'm also going to avoid this area where I'll have the reflected light from the table. So again, diagonal that matches the original diagonal. Then I'll flip and I'll do the second diagonal trying to match that same mark. that I started with, and then horizontal, then vertical. Now I lost my 6B, so I'm going to use my 8B, but you should start with the 6B first. And I'm really working on the darkest part now of my core shadow. Diagonal, diagonal, horizontal, vertical. And I really want to keep it in this dark zone. You can see how much darker it is, just the nature of the pencil, darker than the area around it. So I want to be careful with my 8B to not go too far out into the space and spaces surrounding that core shadow, and to really work on varying where those marks stop so that it blends it into the space around. Now I'm going to move backwards, just like I did last time. So I've gotten nice and dark. Now I'm going to move from my darks back out into my lights. And I'm going to sharpen my pencil because my 4B is dull and we don't want to use dull pencils. So I'm going to clean up my reflected light back here. Really start right at the edge and pull my line in towards my core shadow. At this point, my dark values are very robust and built up, and I'm really happy with that layout. And I need to work on my mid-tone and my light values up here as we get closer to the highlight. So I'm going to skip my 2B and I'm going to switch right up to my HB. And I'm going to work on bringing the values. I'm going to use a really light touch, lots of close light hatches with my HB. And I'm going to work on pulling some really light values out from those dark shadows and making a nice transition into my highlights. Horizontal, vertical, and diagonal lines layered up. I'm going to work some kind of darker mid-tones in with my 2B. And at this point, I'm going to work with my 2H and my 4H just to kind of add a little bit more layering in the lightest values here coming into the center. And I want to remind you that this is just learning, right? We're just practicing, we're figuring this out. You're not going to have a perfect sphere. I don't have a perfect sphere. There's things about how I laid out my value initially in a few places that bother me a little bit. But you know what? That's okay, because it's not about being perfect, it's about getting better. We're just learning, and we're trying to build our skills, build our understanding, build our muscle memory. You know, artists have to build muscle memory just like athletes. So I'll tell my students that if you're a basketball player, you're going to practice lots and lots of free throws so that when you're on that free throw line in the game, you make those shots and you get those points for your team. The more you practice the free throw, the better your body remembers that movement, the more likely you are to make a shot. And that's what we're doing by practicing cross-hatching and hatching. We're trying to remember a movement and a process, and the more you do it, the better you get. I have cross-hatched and hatched and scumbled and stippled, which are next 2 marks, tons and tons and tons in my life as an artist and my life as an art teacher. And so my body just kind of knows what to do. And even though it knows what to do, sometimes it doesn't do it right. And that's okay. But the only way to get better and the only way to make it automatic is practicing. Now, as I'm finishing my passes and I'm getting into these lighter tones and values, what I'm doing is I'm just really carefully kind of looking at where on this sphere do I need more marks? What looks right? What doesn't look right? If it doesn't look right, what do I need to do to make it look right? How do I make this piece feel complete and feel whole? And I could nitpick on this kind of stuff on my own art forever, but we're going to move on. I feel like this is pretty good. I've got nice value range, both darks and lights. I've blended things together. And if you count all the marks I've made to finish this piece, I'm guessing there'd be at least hundreds. I don't know about thousands. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to take my vinyl eraser. I'm just going to clean up around that outside edge. Then I'm going to add a cast shadow, and then I'm going to add some value in the wall behind my sphere. If you are one of my students, I want you to make sure that when you practice your sphere, that you practice that cast shadow. If you want to add the value around the sphere as well, you can. And then, I also want to remind you guys, it is just practice. See how it goes. Try your best. That's all you can do. And if it doesn't turn out great the first time, oh well, you can try it again. As I finish blending out my background with my 2B, I just want to give you some parting words with crosshatching. Remember, you want to have multiple passes of diagonal, diagonal, horizontal, vertical. In the end, it doesn't matter what order you put them in, it matters that you have them in about equal proportions. In the lightest areas of your pieces, you might only have 1 diagonal. You don't have to have all 4 everywhere. In fact, you could crosshatch a whole piece with just diagonals in opposing directions, or just horizontals and verticals. You don't necessarily have to have all 4. All 4 is technically correct, really traditional way to crosshatch. And that's what we're learning in our first unit in Intro to Drawing. It's just how to do these things the quote-unquote right way. So diagonal, diagonal, horizontal, vertical. Try to match the direction every time you start a new pass with a new pencil so that you have things going in relatively the same direction with each pass. Remember to vary where your lines start and stop so you don't have hard edges. And a good crosshatch starts with a good hatch. You've got to have a nice mark that you can keep straight, that you can keep going in the same direction, and that isn't a scribble. You pick the pencil up at the start and the beginning of each pass. And don't forget to sharpen your pencils. I think that's one of my biggest pet peeves in my Intro to Drawing class is students that use really dull pencils. Keep a nice sharp pencil. Give yourself a really beautiful mark. And with cross-hatching, it's about layering, my friends. Just like any mark, just like all things in drawing, it's a layering process. But with cross-hatching, if you stop too early, the outcome doesn't look quite as nice. So take your time, layer it up, turn on your favorite podcast or some of your favorite music, maybe even your favorite TV show, but you can't watch it and draw at the same time, and just see what you can do. If it doesn't turn out great the first time, try it again. Don't give up on yourself. You can do this. Have fun, and I hope you surprise yourself with how amazing you truly are.